Jesus shows up. And this is the moment where Thomas is like, well, unless I touch, and Jesus invites him to do exactly that. And then we have another gap. Now, the book of Matthew says, that Jesus had given them instruction, and that there was this instruction for the disciples that when he rose, he would meet them in Galilee. So the disciples, whether they fully understood everything that Jesus had instructed them, they move up to Galilee. Are we okay then? Okay. And this is where we catch this text here. John chapter 21, after these things, so what we've just talked about, Jesus manifested himself, he revealed himself, he showed himself, he appeared to the disciples again at the Sea of Tiberias. Now the note here, Tiberias, this is the Sea of Galilee, and so it has multiple names, just like the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. You know, we have the Sea of Galilee and the Sea of Tiberias. And actually, it's interesting because this one, it actually makes sense if you look at the chronology of history and how John, what time, the time period that John had written it. And so that's why he names it that. But anyway, we have this sea, and he shows himself in this way. And so here's the account. Verse 2, Simon Peter, and Thomas, doubting Thomas, also called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, and two others not named, were together. And Simon says to the group, Peter being the leader, he says to the group, I'm going fishing. And they all say, well, we're going to come with you. And so they went out, and they got into this boat, and they caught nothing. Peter speaking up, I'm coming with you. Sorry, I'm going fishing, and the rest respond, I'm coming with you. I'm trying to put myself in Peter's situation. Peter failed Jesus. He denied him 3 times. To me, there's a shame that's associated with that. You know, when we fail, we retreat. I can't help but wonder how Peter felt. He now knows Jesus is alive, but they haven't had a chance really to talk about all of that. But he knows he's failed him. And I know when I have failed that there's this element of, I got to retreat. I got to step back. There's a shame factor. We go back to what we know best. We hunker down. And we hope that whatever has happened will blow over and we can kind of reemerge and things will be resolved. There's something else that I think is happening, not just Peter's shame when he says, I'm going fishing, but there's this waiting. Jesus had said, well, I'll see you up in Galilee. Well, when? What day? What hour? The disciples are waiting, and they're waiting. So what do? How long do you wait? How often have you been longing for some kind of answer to prayer, and we're waiting for Jesus to show up. We're waiting for Jesus to provide direction. We're waiting for Jesus to solve a problem. And they're waiting. And so they head out and they go fishing, and they get nothing. They go out, and I'm assuming they fished all night. I'm assuming that they went out as the sun was setting, and they get into their boat, and they go out and they cast their nets, and they get nothing, and they cast their nets, and they get nothing, and they cast their nets, and they get nothing. Have you ever felt the futility of work? You ever go to do something and it's like you're not getting any results? It's one of the reasons why I love working with wood. You take a bunch of 2x4s, you cut them, add some screws. Next thing you know, you got a table. I can look at it and go, aha, That's the fruit of my labor. You know, it's satisfying to do something and actually see the results. When you do something and you don't see the results, it's discouraging. And these guys fish all night, and they get nothing. They get a big donut. We function, think about this. This is kind of the difference that Jesus makes. Jesus wasn't there. Jesus wasn't with them. And they're setting back off to do what they were professionals at, what they knew best. And they work all night and they get nothing. And I wonder, well, I believe strongly that God intervened. That they got nothing for a reason. Because I think God was trying to teach these guys a lesson. The difference that Jesus makes. I think these guys went out and they fished all night and they got nothing, even though they knew exactly how to fish and they knew exactly how to row and they knew exactly how to manage a boat and they knew exactly where the fish would be, in theory. But I think God just says, no. Not without Jesus. You can be a master electrician, but without Jesus, your returns will be nothing. You can be a master fisherman. Without Jesus, your returns will be nothing. You can be a master at just about anything, but if you don't have the blessing, if you don't have Jesus in control, everything you get will be worthless. Turn with me to John chapter 15. I just see this truth kind of popping out in my mind. John 15, starting at verse 4, it says this, it says, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." It's a tough lesson that we can try and do stuff and we can have skills and we can have the knowledge and the information, but without Christ, it's futile. It's empty. You'll catch no fish. And I have learned, or been forced to learn, over and over, because I forget. And so with the shame of Peter and all the waiting, they do what they know is best and they come up empty. And when I think of us as a church, I think that we need to be reminded that nothing of value can take place if Jesus is not in it. I should say that again. Nothing of value can take place here if Jesus is not in it. That is important for all of us to learn. There's a principle here that we have a season where we can labor, and without the leading of the Lord, it's empty. Professionalism, hard work, never substitutes for divine direction and blessing. You will just be spinning your wheels. What a difference Jesus makes. Verse 4. Verse 4 says, "When the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, 'Children, you do not have any fish, do you?' And they answered him, 'No.' And he said to them, 'Well, cast the net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you will find a catch.' And so they cast, and they were not able to haul it in because of the great number of fish." The truth that Jesus makes all the difference in the world comes to light at this point. When the day was breaking, they had fished all night, no success. And this is reminiscent of Luke chapter 5. Remember the the disciples, they're out there and they'd fished all night, and they come in and they're fixing their nets, and Jesus come along and he says, well, go try again. Just go deeper and cast your nets. And there was so much, and the boat gets filled. Jesus has come along, and so here after the entire night with zero success, Jesus comes along and they don't know it's him. They don't know it's him, but he speaks and he tells them to try again. He tells them which side to cast their nets, and I don't know much about fishing, but I'm thinking, okay, so a boat, so that side's got fish and that side, I'm like, how does that work? Like, really, there's that much of a difference in 5 feet of water? But that's the way God works, and God gives them direction. Jesus speaks. But they don't know it's him. What amazes me is that they listen to somebody that they don't know. Somebody from the shore says, go do this. And I'm thinking, if it was me, and this is maybe my own arrogance, but I'm thinking, okay, maybe I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional fisherman, and I've been doing this for the last 20 years of my life, and I know these waters. I grew up in this area. Who are you to tell me when and where to go fish? And so I've got some issues. But what amazes me is they listen. When someone gives advice, the gut reaction is, yeah, really? Wait, what do you know about this? Am I the only one? Okay, all right, thank you. Some people will just ignore and will say, yeah, that's good advice, and then we just ignore it and we walk away. That's an interesting thought. But somewhere along the line, these disciples did learn something. And I love this. They're humble enough to take the advice. They're humble enough to listen to whoever's on the shore. And rather than just ignoring, rather than doing nothing, they hear the voice and they're like, fine, we will throw the net on this side of the boat. We'll do as this person says. And so here's the lesson that I'm seeing in this part of the text is don't let pride stand in the way. They don't know this is Jesus, and at the root of just about every sin is the sin of pride. We can even say right at the heart of sin is the letter I. I. And all too often we let ourselves, our own ego, get in the way of the work that God is trying to accomplish. But thankfully, these men had learned something, and even though they were professionals, they knew enough about fishing, they knew all about that stuff. They listened to this guy, and they cast the nets. And the result, they cast, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great number of fish. Verse 7. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved, this is John, said to Peter, it is the Lord. It is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, when he heard John speak those words, he put his outer garment on, for he was stripped for work, so he probably still had a loincloth on, and he threw himself into the sea. So now he's got his over covering, he's got a loin, and he just jumps into the water. He doesn't wait for anybody or anything. He realizes who this one person is standing on the shore. He realizes it is Jesus Christ. It is the Lord. And all of his past 3 years flashing by through his mind, and he's like, I'm in the water. And he goes. And he's driving to shore. Now we find out it's only about 100 yards away, so he's just got a short swim, but man, he's going fast. And he's not interested in waiting to turn things around and pull the net in and all that kind of stuff. He just knows that his Savior, Jesus Christ, is at the shore, and he goes for it. It registers with these guys what is going on. Luke 5 has repeated itself all over again. And the only one who can do such incredible things is Jesus Christ. What a difference Jesus makes. John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, he sees it first and he tells Peter, it's the Lord. And Peter hears it without any thought. He jumps in the water. He realizes that Jesus is there, and for Peter, there isn't much of anything else that is of any importance. He looks at the things of the world, he looks at the things around him, he says, what matters most to me? And it doesn't take a second for him to decide. And he grabs his tunic and he jumps. And the rest of the disciples are in the boat, and they start rowing, and they try to bring the boat to shore, and they're dragging the nets. And just in my own thoughts, I just think about, well, why didn't they recognize Jesus? And this is just kind of a little sidebar kind of thought. Jesus has risen from the dead. There is something different about him. There's something incredibly the same, because Thomas touches, he sees the scars. The people on the road to Emmaus, there's two guys and they walk with Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and it's interesting how when they finally recognized him, what was it that Jesus was doing? He was breaking bread. And then their eyes were opened. So how did we not see? He was with us this whole journey. The disciples, when they're gathered and he shows up, and Thomas, it's like he's standing right in front. Jesus is right there. Is that not enough to see his face and go, yeah, it's Jesus? No, I have to touch. 1 Corinthians 15 tells us that we will all change, that our resurrection bodies will be like that of Jesus. And so for me, it's a fascination to look at Jesus in this resurrection state, in part because it should be, and for me at least, for hopefully for you, it's a reminder but also a declaration of hope of what will come. That we are not going to stay like this. If you have a relationship in Jesus Christ, this is not the end. These bodies are falling apart. These bodies are aging, and this stuff is real, and at some point, we are going to be transformed. And whether it be the rapture where we're taken up, or we experience death, and then God raises us again, it is a hope that we can look forward to. And so I watch these texts that describe Jesus with great interest. But one of the things that we do need to see is that when God provides a miracle of blessing like he does here, he also provides a way to manage that blessing. The nets didn't tear. I think that's kind of interesting. There's all of this fish, and there's this boat, and they catch all of this fish, and the nets don't tear. Although there were so many in the net was not torn, verse 11. When Jesus provides, he also provides the capacity to hold the blessing. I've been thinking about this just in my life and us as a church, and it's a challenge. If God blesses, he'll provide a way to manage the blessing. Oh. But I'm the kind of guy that, sometimes I just want to go, okay, well, I need to have this, and then this, and we need to think about this, and we need to think about this, and it's like, okay. But God will take care of it. If God blesses, he'll take care. Carry on, verse 12. Jesus says to the disciples, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples, it says, ventured to question him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. Knowing that it was Jesus Christ. And it says here, Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and the fish likewise. If you're like me, when we started, I was thinking about, the futility. The futility of working and not getting any results. And here they went through the night and they got no results, and now they've got this great result, and now they don't even care. Because Jesus is there. I like to do things where I have some concrete outcome. I enjoy doing things with measurable outcomes. My working with wood. But here, what Jesus, when he shows up, when he does great things, the greatest thing is not what he does. What I marvel at this point is not just that he's done the miracle and provided fish. That's big in itself. You know, the difference that Jesus makes. The futility of working all night without, and then the yield of Jesus now being involved, huge difference. But the light bulb for Peter goes on that as much as I've got all this fish, 153, what does he care about? Suddenly the miracle of the fish doesn't even matter. What matters is that his Savior is on the shore. Jesus makes all the difference in the world in the things that we do and the things that we don't do. To engage in anything without seeking God's blessing, to engage in anything that is contrary to the will of God, is absolute disaster, emptiness, futility. Pray for God's direction. Pray for God's blessing. Ask for him to watch over you, to guide you. The difference that Jesus makes. But what I marvel at is that after all of this is said and done, they get to the shore and Jesus is sitting there and he's already got a fire going with fish already on it. He didn't need the 153. And so they show up and he invites them to breakfast and all of that stuff. There's a lesson in it, the difference that Jesus makes. But what I get the most out of this text is that ultimately they don't care, because now what really matters is fellowship with Jesus Christ. And they can sit on the shore and have breakfast with Jesus. The relationship with him supersedes everything else. So I guess I would have to ask you, for each of us, is that our heart's desire? First off, are we looking for God to give us blessing and to give us direction and then bless the directions we go? Are we seeking his will in those things? That's the first question. But the second thing is, do we even really want fellowship with him? That should be our primary desire. Do we want to be with him? Do we want to spend time with him? Would we enjoy breakfast with Jesus? That's what we should want. It's interesting that he provides it all. He doesn't need the 153 from the water. And I just think about him appearing in that room, and I think about the miraculous way in which he rises from the dead, and I think about how he multiplied the fish and the bread to feed the 5,000, and I think about the wine that multiplies, and I wonder, a fish or some fish and bread on a fire on this morning, and I ask myself, did he make it out of nothing? And I think there's probably a likelihood that he just, here's the fish, and here's the bread. Just a theory. But he provided the feast. I need to quit because we're going to take communion. If I could have my guys, if the elders would make their way, please, over to the side. I want us to think about this. Our communion time, our taking of the bread and the cup, is the remembrance of a feast. We do this in remembrance of what Jesus Christ has done, and it was instigated, it was started at the Passover, a great feast. And he took the bread and he took the cup and he passed it around, and he says, symbolically, he says, this is my body, and then he says, this is my blood. But he also talks about how he will not do it again until we are together with him in the end. There is a great feast to come. And so we can take two approaches to this. You can think and reflect, and we should, on how Jesus Christ earned our salvation with the breaking of his body and the shedding of his blood on the cross. Absolutely. But we can also partake of this and think ahead of a feast, not a breakfast, but a great meal where we will, in that day, enjoy him forever. And I long for that day. So let's partake, but as we do this, let me start with the first word of caution. Steve mentioned this in his announcements, that if there's anything that you're carrying, anything that's in your heart that's weighing heavy and you haven't gone to the Lord with it, let's just have a moment of silence and just between you and the Lord, just have that conversation. And just whatever it is you need to do, just commune with him. Take yourself 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, and just pray.